Welcome back to the Changemaker, the Art of Building Better Leaders podcast. I'm Deke Copenhaver, your host. My guest today is somebody who really excites me to talk to all the time, Ms. Deanna Brown Thomas. Deanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and I'm just happy to be part of the change maker process.
Welcome to the Change Maker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Change Maker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
We're going to be talking about change-making leadership, and obviously your dad, Mr. James Brown, was a change-making leader himself, but as are you. You're founder of the James Brown Academy of Music Pupils. You're the president of the James Brown Family Foundation. You are such a leader in so many ways, but just talk a little bit about those organizations.
Well, thank you so very much, Deke. I appreciate that. Congratulations on your book. It is awesome. I've read it, so I can say that with very much distinction, boldness. It's very good, and it is a change maker, and I hope that all people will read your book. I think that your book needs to be a part of some type of class at somebody's college or high school.
Yeah.
Because high school, because that's something that that book you could really use to teach a lot of young kids to get into the direction of leadership. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
Well, as you all know, James Brown wrote the song, Papa Don't Take No Mess. I lived it. Papa didn't take no mess. And our conversations a lot of times, Deke, was being there for your people, helping people out. Helping out the human race. You know, my dad would always say the most important race is the human race. And so I would see him in so many different situations where, a lot of people didn't see. My dad, through his career, he would give scholarships to young kids to go to school. And he would I remember him buying this lady a car who did prison ministry in Kansas City, Kansas. And he bought her car because her car broke down and she couldn't get it fixed. And what she did, he felt was important. She went to the prison to minister to the inmates. So he got her a car. I remember being in California with him one time. We were riding down. We were in South Central LA, and the sidewalks there are really big. So he has the limousine driver to stop. He gets out the car. The security guards are like, what's going on? What is he doing? So they jump out, and he looks around and turns around at me, and he says, Deanna, come on. I'll show you something. So I get out the car, and I follow him across the street. On this sidewalk were homeless people who were asleep on the cardboard, old blankets or whatever. And when you saw their faces, you thought they saw a ghost because they couldn't believe that they saw James Brown walking towards them.
I'm sure.
And he told one young man that stuck out to me, and I'll never forget it. He says, take this money and go clean yourself up and go get you some food. Do something for yourself. And what I saw in my dad at that day, I had never seen before. What I saw was it wasn't about the money that he gave these people. It was the hope that he put in them. It was the hope. Now, mind you, they were still shocked that they were looking at James Brown, in the natural eye, not on TV or a poster or something, but that he took the time. Because my dad never forgot where he came from. And those kind of, watching him every year in, year out at the turkey and toy giveaway, especially the turkey giveaway, because that's a time when he literally saw people he grew up with. but never made it out the hood like he did.
I
But
w-
he didn't. He never forgot about that.
No.
And that's that really kicked off starting the James Brown Family Foundation, Deke, because one of the first questions I got after he passed was, "Are y'all going to continue giving away turkeys?" That's when I realized this is more than just an event. This is a need. So the James Brown Family Foundation we started, and it was then we started the program for the kids, JAMP, and that's 10 years this year. We've been doing that for 10 years. We've seen a lot of kids come through and seen a lot of lives change. My father said, you put an instrument in a child's hand and you change their life, you will see a miracle happen. And I have. I've just taken all of the things that I learned from my father. When he wasn't calling me at 2 a.m. from China or Prague or Czech Republic or
And everybody can relate to that.
yeah, everybody can relate to getting a call from your dad when he's around the world. But those talks, I just poured into the foundation, JAMP, and all of these kids, and even with the James Brown Family Historical Tour, these things that I've learned from him, I just took and poured into the foundation. And thank you for saying those things. I don't know if a lot of people notice, but it's not easy being the daughter of an icon like James Brown, so, but I'm sure Hoss understands what I go through.
Understands. Hoss, our baby corgi.
He's got famous parents. He understands.
Yeah. But no, I know that that's not easy, but you've carried it so well. And I think that's such a major part of leadership is the way you carry yourself. And you are, effectively you're setting an example for others like your dad did with you in L.A. And that, to me, and we talk about good leadership or change-making leadership, to me, it's about providing people hope. And I've often shared with people that if you have to use fear and intimidation to get your way in a leadership position, that's bullying. Mm-hmm. That is not leadership.
And control.
But you've got to be able to inspire. And to me, leadership is not about seeking power. It's about seeking to empower. And that's what your dad did.
Mm-hmm. And he did that through his messages, through his songs. It's unfortunate today we don't get to hear strong, uplifting messages in songs like we did. Don't be a dropout, encouraging kids to stay in school. The words in that song, the lyrics in that song is, without an education, you might as well be dead. What are you going to be able to contribute to society, Another one, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, get it myself. Just give a person an opportunity.
Exactly.
Just open the door and give them the opportunity. You never know what they may do. They may turn your business around. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. He did that during a time in the 60s when he wrote that song on a napkin right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And he saw what was going on to young black people. And he wrote that song. And so and what amazed me was last year after George Floyd's death, I saw so many different people talk about what they had on their playlist. Black, white, young, old, and it was Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, which to me was almost like a resurgent of a song that's over 50 years old, okay? The song was written in August of 1968. I'm sorry, it was released in August of 1968. And my son, he was doing a lot of music and festivals during the protest out in California. They literally put a DJing booth on a truck and went through town and with these uplifting songs, Say It Loud being one of them.
I saw that on Instagram, and that was so cool. And for our listeners, Grand Soul Son is his Instagram tag, and it's he is James Brown's grandson, and just an amazing. I mean, I love following him and seeing what Jason's doing. He is all over the world.
He is. He definitely has that in him. I see a lot of that, especially when I watch a lot of young clips of my dad being young. I see my son. I can see it, and he's a DJ. He also produces films, and he's a camera guy. Maybe I should have had him come in here, set up the cameras for us. But he's done all of that. He's a graduate of SCAD, so he's not out here trying to ride on his granddaddy's name.
No,
he's working.
He is definitely working, and I'll tell you, you and I have had these conversations that one of my fondest memories with your dad was I was coming home from work one night and coming up the street, and he called me, and we were talking about religion, politics, everything that, music, everything that polite Southerners shouldn't talk about. And he said, "Man, dude, you're just like a Kennedy. Black people love you." And I kid you not. I mean, I walked in the door when I got home with a smile from ear to ear, and I'm like, "Melissa, that's the coolest thing that ever happened to me." But to a large degree, the reason it was so cool to me is I'm like, he was there in the 60s.
Yeah.
And he helped calm a riot in Philadelphia and calm riots in Augusta in the early 70s. And I thought of him last year. I thought, golly, with the demonstrations and with everything going on, just a voice of the people that people could trust. And if you can calm a riot during the 60s, you're a bad man.
Well, I'm going to tell you what Look magazine, which was a big magazine in those days, they called him, they asked the question, is James Brown the most important black man in America? And to a lot, he was, because the powers to be in the government was a little afraid in a sense, because they felt as though, and this is for real, I'm giving you some real report here, they felt like if James Brown could stop a riot, he could start one.
Wow.
That's power.
That is power.
That's another kind of power that you have to recognize.
With great power comes great responsibility, and your
Yes.
father knew that, and you can use that power for great good or not.
Right.
But I want to tell you another story, because this is just, everything happens for a reason. And so I got a call right before coming down here from our good friend George Diaz.
Okay.
And so I was telling Molly, our assistant for the summer, about the story about the James Brown Get On Up premiere being brought to Augusta, and how hard George and others fought to make that happen. But getting into leadership too, that night being able to meet Chadwick Boseman.
Oh, yes.
And I was telling Molly on the way over here, I said, what a person who could bring people together through quiet and humble leadership. And you got to know him well, and your family, and talk a little bit about Chadwick and what he was like, but what your feelings on what he meant to the world. Because I feel like in a time when we need heroes, he was one.
Yes, he definitely was one. And he
And
was
is one.
And is one. And is and was one for little kids, black and white. They see Black Panther and they love it. They see a superhero, and I had the opportunity to go to his memorial in Anderson, South Carolina, where he's from, and speak. And I saw these kids out here, and they were all little black boys, little white boys, running around with their little Black Panther outfit on, almost like it was Halloween. And I just felt like, golly, Chad, you were only here for 42 years, 43 years, but look what you left. All of these, you get on Twitter and you see these little kids having funerals for Black Panther. Like, that's amazing. Like, a child has to literally think about, we got to do something for Black Panther, And when you affect a young child's life like that, that goes with them for the rest of their lives. Chadwick was a very humble young man. He was raised properly. He was raised in the church. Wonderful parents, wonderful, wonderful people. down home, good folks. When Chadwick, as well as Tate Taylor, the director of Get On Up, when they came to Augusta, they spent the weekend with us. They had a chance to sit down and talk with my mom, as well as me and my sister, and ride around Augusta, and we share stories and show them different things. Because, first of all, Chad was very insistent to come and sit with us because he wanted to be sure that he gave as much authenticity in his role as he could. So he wanted to talk to people who not just worked for or with Dad, but lived with him. Working for somebody and living with him is two different things.
I would say so.
And so we had that conversation. My mother just fell in love with Chad. She thought he was a sweetheart of a young man, humble, and he didn't come with all of this Hollywood. Mm-mm. He had his shirt and jeans on and just regular. You know, we took him to me and my husband's restaurant, Deshawn's, and Taylor was like, "Oh yeah, everybody order. I'm gonna buy everybody food." So me and my husband looking at each other like, "Well, you don't have to. What? Don't worry about it. I'm gonna buy everybody food." All righty then. If you want to buy me and my husband dinner at our restaurant, we are glad. You go for it, young man. And he was sitting there. Chad was sitting there eating his fish sandwich with his hot sauce, licking his fingers, talking about this is good, and eating his French fries, and it was just like having family.
Yeah.
You know, just sitting around, you know, just enjoying one another, just fellowship. And I love that about him. I love that he didn't come with all the Hollywood. I love that he just came as Chad and what's up, y'all? You know, I love that about him. So we liked him as a person, as a young man first. And his work is tremendous. I mean, the man played Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall. I mean, you know, you don't get to play James Brown. You don't get to play these kind of people and not have your thing together. This young man, and every actor, from Denzel Washington to Viola Davis, every actor, to Dan Aykroyd, every actor that he worked with saw a true, authentic artist. He put his money where his mouth was. He studied. He was real in his acting. If he did a part, you can best believe he did the research and he studied like he was supposed to. He was just authentic inside and out. I mean, you could not have met a better person. I saw an interview that he did after, just before Get On Up came out in the movies, and someone asked him, he said, "So you've done these premieres, you know, have you enjoyed yourself, this, that, and the other?" He says, "Oh man, Augusta was the best. Augusta's premiere was the best for Chad. He loved it."
That is awesome to hear, but there was I talk to people about and talk about in my book that a part of good leadership, change-making leadership, is vulnerability, and I think that comes through with humility. And he had the most humble, when my brief conversation with him, humble spirit. But I think that's what people responded to was his openness. And with change-making leadership, I always tell people, you can't put yourself on a pedestal above those you serve. You need to be on equal footing. But I think that's one of the things I always noticed about your father. When he passed, I said, now I think Augusta will be able to see what he meant to the world of music. Yeah. Because I think it's almost like you're too close to it, or it's biblical.
Right. It is very biblical. Yes, what is it? A prophet in his own hometown is not recognized.
But you could run into your father at the Soul Bar, and he was just touchable and approachable.
Oh, back in the day, you'd run into him at S&S Cafeteria. He loved to eat over there.
Oh, yeah. But for his homegoing service, CNN went live from downtown Augusta, Georgia, for 4 hours. And I shared with people afterwards. I said, "Look, CNN does not go live to cover just anybody's homegoing service." That was amazing to me.
Right. You're absolutely right. And to put another layer on that, it was the same day as the funeral for President Gerald Ford. CNN didn't. They were not even there. I don't even know if they had cameras there during the time that Dad's funeral was, because after Dad's funeral, which was from 1 until about 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the evening, CNN, like you said, was live from the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia. And they turned on President Ford's funeral. It was dark. They had the lights out. They had the lights up, because they were outside. But you didn't get to see much of anything because most of the day was spent on James Brown. I ran into this young man that was in the islands, and my husband and I were about to go boating. And so one of the captains on the boat, somebody told him who I was, and he was so ecstatic. He was, "Oh my God, somebody said you're James Brown's daughter. I'm trying not to be nervous. I'm trying just talk calm." And so he was really cool. He was a young guy. He was college. He had just graduated from college, and I think he was just, trying to get himself together. He was from Florida. And he says, when your dad died, he says, I came to Augusta. I drove to Augusta from Destin, Florida, to see this funeral. He says when he was leaving out the door, his dad told him, he says, well, President Ford, his funeral's today too. The young man says, I don't care nothing about him. He says, I'm a musician. I play the guitar. I'm going to see James Brown. I couldn't believe it. I says, really? He says, yeah, I drove from Destin, Florida because I wanted to be there to show my respects for a man who, in my opinion, changed music for the better.
Well, it's interesting. We'll touch a little bit on politics, but I remember a conservative Republican lobbyist friend of mine from D.C. calling me after the homegoing service, and the press was making a big deal over it's going to cost taxpayers $70,000. And I said, look, this is the homegoing service of James Brown. If it costs the city $70,000, it is what it is, but we're going to do it right. So conservative Republican lobbyists said, thank you for saying that. So, I mean, he crossed so many lines. And I remember, too, on that day, as we've discussed in the past, being asked to come out and pray in the prayer circle with the family and holding hands with Jesse Jackson and Reverend Al Sharpton and Reverend Al saying, well, he's a Republican. And Jesse Jackson leaning over to Al and saying, well, Mr. Brown was a Republican too. And for the record, I'm happily independent. But I think most people do not know that your dad was a Republican, and he endorsed Richard Nixon in 1972.
Yes, which caused him a little problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Caused him a little problem. Some folks walked away and was like, James Brown done gone crazy.
but that too is leadership, is being unafraid to take a risk, and he knew he was going to catch flack for that.
Right.
But you think about Reverend Sharpton and your dad, father-son relationship, and they didn't agree politically.
No. But
so,
at the end of the conversation on the phone, it was always this, Deke. I love you, son. Talk to you later.
And I wish that would be a place that we could get back to. But that's what I hope to do with this podcast, is bring people from all walks of life on, from all over the world, that can have a conversations on leadership, what true leadership is, which it means bringing people together, not tearing them apart.
Right,
and,
to communicate.
And your father, music does that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure that, people didn't care about going to a James Brown show. You weren't talking politics. You were there to dance, and you were there to experience the talent.
Later in his career, most of his shows were predominantly white. Most of the audience was predominantly white. And, that's something that, we had begun to notice, which he didn't find it to be surprising. He didn't at all. because he traveled all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him calling me one time. He was in China. And mind you, artists can't just book a show and go to China. In certain places, they just can't go and perform. You have to go through the government. And you don't request to go over there. They request you to come. They requested him to be at this event. And they were showing a video, a documentary that they had put together about Dad. And that amazed him. I was literally on the air, still doing radio. And it was during the 5 o'clock hour. And I used to do this thing, the 5 o'clock rush hour mix. So I'm on the phone with my dad, not making any breaks. And I'm like, I'm going to lose my job because I haven't said one word in 1 hour. But I was listening to my father and was like, how do I tell him that, hold on, while he's calling me from China and talking about how amazed he was to see the people of China love him and know so much about him. That amazed him.
Yeah.
Because I guess but it was just, Dad knew, he would always say, none of this is me. This is God. This is God. He says, I got a 7th grade education. How come I can understand what I understand? He says, how come I can sit down and do big deals with people all over the world with a 7th grade education?
And that's something that I love that your father said that, because we are all given spiritual gifts and we're supposed to use them and go out into the world.
We first got to recognize them. We first got to recognize them and accept them. And I think that sometimes stumps people because you got to recognize that you were given some gifts, and when you recognize them and use them for good, not for selfish gain.
And he used them for good.
Yes,
I will tell
did.
you, I just meeting him my first year in office and just hitting it off with him so well. I consider that one of the high points of my 9 years serving as mayor of Augusta, but that just meant the world to me. And
he loved you. He really, Dad could see through people. I mean, oh my gosh, I wish I had that type of, he could see a joker come around the corner. I mean, within 5 minutes, he could read you and tell you about you. And he loved you. Whatever he saw in you, I know that he would talk about you being young and fresh is good for this town.
Yeah.
It was good for Augusta because you were young and fresh with new ideas. That old way of thinking. I'm just telling you what the Godfather said. He says, it's got to go. You need somebody in here with some fresh stuff. And he felt that way with you. So whatever he saw in you, he was right, because you were very good to this city, still is. And on behalf of my family, we were very thankful to you because doing a funeral for a man such as James Brown, when it's just still Daddy, was not easy. You led the city. Sean Franton was a big help during that time as well. We lost a couple of great men recently. Flash Gordon, who was the general manager of the James Brown Arena at the time, who told me, Deanna, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. Just those comforting words was a help to me.
Yeah.
Mr. Charlie Reed of C.A. Reed Memorial. Our families go back over 50 years. His father and my dad were business partners. They used to own this club called the Third World, which is now the funeral home. And, I mean, these men were there for me during the hardest part of my life. And I will say that was the hardest time of my life. But it was amazing because after that, his band performed down at the Hard Rock Cafe, and they performed for the Republican National. He was the chairman at the time. I forgot his name. But it was amazing because it was all kinds of people that were there at the Hard Rock Cafe. And of course, Dad had just passed, and they knew his band was there. So it was like, I was sitting next to the chairman of the RNC, and then I was sitting next to a couple other people. I didn't know them, but they weren't Republicans, but they just loved James Brown. So it just goes to show, back to what you said, how Dad's music and how he just kind of brought all kinds of people together. You know, it's what I expect to see in heaven. Everybody.
Exactly.
Some of everybody.
And I will tell you, that is, I wanted you as my first guest today because we're on the same page. But you know what? There are a lot more people out there that think like us. And so having that dialogue and that conversation, and I'll tell you, I missed seeing you during COVID. I feel like we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. But thank you for just coming in and just having a conversation with me. And what amazing stories. But your dad was a uniter of people. Yes. You are a uniter of people. And true leaders, change-making leaders are uniters of people.
Trying to be as well as we possibly can, taking all those things that I learned from him, watching him on the road. I got to travel with him. I was the hairdresser. I had to do his hair. And, that's important business now. That's very important business. Yeah. So I learned a lot just sitting there, rolling his hair, doing his hair, listening to him work on the phone.
Exactly.
Like I said, my father, he loved you, and he loved his city, and
Absolutely.
He took this city, and wherever he went, I don't care where he was, whether they could understand English or not, he talked about how much he loved Augusta, Georgia. He wrote about it in his song, There Was a Time. He loved it, and we are thankful for all of the support that we've been able to get from the city, and we just continue to try to do things that would rep his name well through the James Brown Family Foundation. And I thank you for recognizing my work and having me to be your first guest. Oh boy,
first of many, but I'm setting the bar high with this one. But I will tell you, love you, sister.
Love you even more. Thank you.
Dropping the mic, and we out.